Building a life with someone else is a lot like growing a very big garden. At first, everything is new and exciting. You spend every moment digging the dirt, planting seeds, and watching for the first tiny green leaves to pop up. But after 20 years, you might stop looking at the flowers because you have seen them every day. You start to take the garden for granted. My wife, Laura, and I had a garden like that. We had been married for almost 20 years. Some of those years were very happy, and some of them were quite hard, as many long marriages are. My name is Robert, and I am 48 years old. Lately, our lives have become very steady and very calm. It was a life where everything felt the same every single day. Our children were mostly grown up now, and they were starting to leave the house to live their own lives. This meant our big family home felt much quieter in the evenings than it used to. Our days followed a rhythm that we both knew by heart. We had our morning coffee together while the sun came up. We went to our jobs, and we met back at the dinner table every night. After 20 years of sharing a bed and a life, you really start to believe that you know the person you married inside and out. You know how they like their eggs cooked. You know when they're in a bad mood just by how they walk. And you even understand what their silence means. That is why what happened that night caught me so completely off guard. It felt as if a map I had used for 20 years suddenly had new, strange roads on it that I did not recognize at all. I realized that even after 2 decades, there were parts of the person I loved that were still a mystery to me. The night of the party. The night everything changed started with a party. It was for one of Laura's co-workers at her office. The party was held in a rented hall that had a very specific smell, a mix of floor wax and cheap perfume. There was loud music playing that made the windows shake. People were drinking and laughing, and dozens of voices were shouting just to be heard over each other. Usually, I am not the kind of person who likes these big social gatherings. I am a bit shy, and I would much rather be at home with a good book or a movie. But Laura had really wanted us to go together. She seemed so excited about it. And after being married for a long time, you learn a very important lesson. Sometimes just being there for your partner is much more important than whether or not you are actually having a good time. At first, the whole night seemed very normal and easy. Laura went off to talk with her friends from work, while I found a few people I barely knew to chat with about the weather and our jobs. People were laughing, glasses were clinking together, and the music filled every corner of the room. After about an hour of this, I needed a break from all the noise. I felt a bit overwhelmed, so I stepped away from the crowd to find some quiet air where I could breathe. I walked down a long, dimly lit hallway that led toward a patio outside. That was when I heard Laura's voice. She was talking softly to someone just around the corner. I slowed my walking without even thinking about it. I did it because her voice sounded different than I had ever heard it. It wasn't the usual voice she used with her friends. It was softer, almost like she was telling a deep secret. When I got to the corner, I stopped. I could hear a man's voice answering her. "You shouldn't be saying things like that," Laura said in a very low voice. The man gave a little laugh that sounded very confident. "You're the one who walked over here to talk to me," he replied. I peeked around the corner very carefully, trying not to be seen. I saw them standing against the wall in the shadows. The man looked a bit younger than Laura, maybe in his early 40s, with dark hair and a nice suit. I didn't recognize him at all. They were standing very close together, much closer than people who just work together usually stand. "I'm married," Laura said again, but her voice didn't sound angry. The man just shrugged his shoulders like it didn't matter to him at all. "That doesn't mean you aren't curious," he said. For a few seconds, neither of them said a word. The air felt heavy between them. Then he stepped even closer and whispered something into her ear that I couldn't hear. Laura didn't look upset or uncomfortable. Instead, she smiled in a way I hadn't seen in a very long time. She looked relaxed, happy, and almost like a younger version of herself. The man reached out and gently touched her arm. Laura didn't move away. She just stayed there, looking at him that one moment. Seeing her let a stranger touch her like that told me everything I needed to know about the state of our marriage. It was a wake-up call that I never expected to receive. The 2 weeks of silence. I didn't make a big scene. I didn't run out and start shouting. I simply stepped back quietly and walked to the patio like nothing had happened. I stood out in the cool night air for a long time, letting the reality of what I saw sink into my mind. It felt like a heavy weight was sitting on my chest. When Laura finally found me a little while later, she was smiling her normal, everyday smile. "Are you having fun?" she asked, as if everything was perfectly fine. I just nodded and said, "It is a nice party." She had no idea I had seen her in that hallway. She had no idea that my world had just shifted. The drive home was quiet, just like it always was. She talked about the songs the DJ played and what her friends were wearing, and I just listened without interrupting. I didn't ask about the man, and she didn't bring him up. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I made a choice. I wasn't going to yell or get angry right away. I wanted to see what she would do next. I wanted to see if she would tell me the truth on her own. Over the next 14 days, I became a quiet observer in my own home. It was like I was watching a movie of my own life. On the surface, everything looked fine. She went to work, we ate dinner together, and we watched television in the evenings. But because I was looking closer, I noticed the tiny changes. She was on her phone much more often than she used to be. She would smile at a text message and then quickly hide the screen or put the phone face down when I walked by. She would take phone calls in the other room, whispering so I couldn't hear. These little things might not mean much by themselves, but when you put them all together, they tell a story you can't ignore. I would watch the way the light hit the walls in the afternoon, feeling like a stranger in the rooms we had painted together years ago. Every meal we ate felt a bit heavier, and every time I asked, "How was your day?" it felt like a test she didn't know she was taking. I even noticed how she started wearing a certain perfume again, a sweet, flowery one she used to save for special nights out. It was a very lonely 2 weeks for me, watching the person I loved keep a secret from me. I felt like there was a wall building up between us, brick by brick, and I was just waiting to see if she would knock it down. The rainy Sunday truth. 14 days after that party, everything changed again. It was a Sunday afternoon, and it was raining very hard outside. The sound of the water hitting the roof was loud and steady. We were sitting in the living room, and the house felt very heavy with all the words we weren't saying. Laura had been very quiet all morning, staring out the window at the rain. Finally, she put her phone down on the coffee table and looked at me with a very serious, sad face. "Robert," she said softly, "there is something I need to tell you." I sat back in my chair and just waited. My heart was beating fast, but I stayed calm. She waited a long time before she could find the right words to say. "Something happened at that party 2 weeks ago," she said. I didn't let her finish. I just nodded and said, "I know." Her eyes got very wide, and she looked shocked. "You know?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yes," I said. "I saw you in the hallway with that man." She went very pale, and she looked like she might cry. The secret she had been carrying for 2 weeks wasn't a secret anymore. It was out in the open. "Did you see everything?" she asked in a tiny voice. "I saw enough," I replied. Laura looked down at her hands in her lap. She looked smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. She finally told me the whole story. She told me his name was Mark, and that he had been flirting with her at work for a while. She said she tried to ignore it first, but that night at the party, they ended up alone in that hallway. She admitted she knew it was wrong, which is why she told him she was married. "But you didn't walk away," I said gently. She shook her head and said, "No, I didn't." It hurt a lot to hear those words, but her honesty felt like a start. She told me the most honest thing of all. "I liked the attention, Robert. It had been so long since I felt like someone really looked at me that way. It scared me how much I liked it. Rebuilding what was broken." The room was silent for a long time after that, except for the sound of the rain against the glass. Laura looked at me with tears in her eyes. "But liking attention is not the same as loving someone," she said. I realized that I didn't want to throw away 20 years of our life together for a moment of feeling special to a stranger. "I love you, Robert." I looked at her, and I saw a real regret in her eyes. It wasn't just a fear of getting caught. She was truly sorry for hurting me. I asked her what she had done about the man. She told me she had ended everything with him the day before. She told him they would never speak again outside of work business. We sat there on the couch for a long time. I told her that trust is a lot like a building. It takes years and years of hard work to finish, but you can knock it down in just a second. She agreed, but she said a building can be rebuilt if both people are willing to do the hard work and put in the time. We talked for over 2 hours that day. We talked about how we had drifted apart into a boring routine, where we didn't really talk anymore. We talked about how lonely we both felt when the kids first left the house, and how the house suddenly felt too big for just the two of us. We admitted that we had stopped really seeing each other as people and had started seeing each other as just parts of the house, like the furniture or the walls. It wasn't an easy talk, and we didn't fix everything that night. There were still a lot of hurt feelings. But for the first time in a very long time, we were actually talking about the human things that matter. My wife thought she had a secret that would stay hidden forever, but that secret ended up being the thing that forced us to finally look at each other again. It was a long and painful journey back to that rainy Sunday, but I'm glad we are taking it. We are still working on our marriage every day, but we are doing it together. We are moving forward one day at a time with honesty, kindness, and a new understanding of what it means to truly love someone.